験して、ちょっ
面白かった。
と面白かったですね。あれ良かったですよ。
うん。
みんなハッピーです。そうそう。もはやね、まあ確かにトレンドになったのは非常に嬉しいんですけど、14どころかね、もはや FF でもないだろうっていういや、作ったのは14チームですよ。可愛く。
そうね。
作った。
I am so consistently impressed with every single live letter that FF14 puts out that it just blows my mind. And this one was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I'm going to get to the obvious feature that was announced coming up in the next couple of patches where I genuinely fear for the lives and souls of so many players because I think they're going to disappear into a pit worse than like garrisons in Warlords of Draenor. But it's going to be big. I watched this live letter. Every 2 minutes, it was like, okay, and here's something new, and here's something new. And they're really dicing around with a lot of stuff that I've got a lot of experience with. So it's definitely worth talking about. I'm not going to cover everything because there's a lot of stuff here. Like, this has got more features than a fucking WoW expansion. Unironically, I'm not being that to be shitty. It's true. The next couple of patches are huge. So as I'm recording this, the servers are down because data center travel is open, which means our friends who have been trapped on the other side of the world can now join us in harmony and celebration. Chaos and light will be bringing themselves together, and no doubt when the servers come up, it's going to be an absolute mess. But it should be fine by the weekend, which is why we're going to throw another Final Fantasy XIV World First event. Yes, stay tuned to the end for that. We're throwing a huge event. We're pretty sure it's a World First attempt at this event, and it's going to be sick. We've also got a new raid coming, which is awesome. Can't wait to see the race start up again. It was so fun last time, especially with the guys from Liquid and the guys from Echo jumping in there and seeing like whether after Dragon Song, the tidings and the rankings are going to change. Super hyped for that. Got that coming. And now they're toying around with an idea that I believe was actually instituted from the suggestion of one Josh Allen Law for World of Warcraft. And it worked very, very well, is that they're going to delay the release of the Savage tier by a week. And they said very clearly, as they always do, it's like, we're just testing this out. We'll see if you guys like this. We'll see if you guys don't like this. It doesn't matter. We're just going to give it a try and see what the feedback is. Maybe we'll adjust it. Maybe we'll just get rid of it entirely. We'll see what they're going to do. All I could say is this was a wonderful, wonderful addition to World of Warcraft when they brought in this delay of releasing like the hard modes a little bit later, letting people enjoy this brand new content, and especially in Final Fantasy XIV, because so many people love the main story quest. There's brand new MSQ that's coming in this patch as well. People want to enjoy it. They want to savor it. When it comes to crafting new stuff, they don't want to be rushed to get into the raid as quickly as possible or anything along those lines. They want to just be able to enjoy it, have a week to breathe, drinking all this brand new content instead of either ignoring it, and I know because I've had to literally cancel streaming at some points during the release of a brand new patch, which is crazy in what I do, right? You should be there live and ready to go, but I had so much to do for raiding. It's like, I can't stream this. I've got to farm like endless mythic zeros and things like that, so it's going to be boring as hell. And I want to just put some tunes on and talk with my boys and just work through this nonsense. So really happy to see this coming to the raiding scene in Final Fantasy XIV. I've seen practically zero negative feedback. There's always something negative, but overwhelmingly positive to World of Warcraft to just give you that breathing room, let people enjoy it. The people who don't enjoy any of the extra stuff in the game will probably be a bit like, I just want to raid right now, but it's a week. It's not the end of the world. You'll be fine. And with good announcement and good warning of when it's coming, you know when your start is going to go. My phone's on. That is just rude. I'm sorry. I apologize. On top of that, they mentioned a lot of stuff with systems and trying to make sure that when they give out raid buffs to people, certainly the critical strike buff and direct hit, that the player base is benefiting from that. I loved this. This shows a lot of care. Instead of just languishing and say, oh, this buff doesn't really benefit you, they're looking at it and going, everybody should benefit from these buffs. Like, if we got a class with guaranteed critical strikes or whatever, and one of the classes is giving out critical strike as a buff, you obviously don't get any benefit from that, and that sucks. So they're going to be addressing that instead of just ignoring it and saying that's a quirk of your class or whatever. I really, really like they're going to do that. MSQ. Now, if you've listened to me and my advice, you've probably, hopefully, played some Final Fantasy IV. The remaster, the Pixel remaster, is extremely good. And of course, Endwalker's brand new starting journey, the fresh journey that we're now going on, is heavily inspired from Final Fantasy IV. And I will be, in upcoming videos, referencing things from Final Fantasy IV, because It's happening. In fact, the brand new dungeon that's coming out, the Fell of Troya, is a town from Final Fantasy IV, and the thrones and things are from Final Fantasy IV. So it's not going to be direct, obviously, but it's heavily inspired, and there'll be definitely some cross-referencing going on there with what they're doing with the story, and I'm so glad to see this, although it's very, very twisted. Can't deny that. It is very, very twisted from what it is in Final Fantasy IV. Troya does not look like a shadowy void prison of death, but it's cool to see that they're still like, yeah, this is happening, and we kind of have an idea of what trials are going to come. They did say a new trial is coming with its own extreme. I'm almost to the point now where I can do extremes as and when they launch, which is very exciting for me. I've been working through them all. We're nearly done, in which case, when a brand new extreme comes, I can jump into it and have some fun. They're making Sephiroth the new Unreal. I kind of like doing the Unreal once a week. It's a nice little weekly reset to get together with friends and bash something out. And thankfully, the Unreal that we do now is very easy. I think Sephiroth is going to be a little bit harder and a little bit more involved, to say the least. So I'm kind of excited for this. When I saw him, I was like, shit. Because the extreme was a little rough. We got through it, obviously, but yeah, okay, not quite what as... Should be fun, though. It should be very exciting to do that. Should be very, very exciting. Now, one of the things that caused a lot of controversy when we watched the live, when I watched it with a lot of you guys, is the excitement in the player base when the new weapons are coming, when the new farming for brand new weapons are coming. And then a 50-50 mix, I would say, of pure delight and abject horror when they announced how they're going to do it this time, which is that they're tying the new weapons that you can grind for to the Hildebrand questline, and Hildebrand, the entire Hildebrand questline is going to be mandatory. Now, for those of you who don't play FF14 and just look forward to us making content, Hildebrand is a questline that began before the A Realm Reborn. It was in the original FF14 towards the very end, when they were just throwing shit at the wall to see what people liked. And they came up with a questline involving a character named Hildebrand, who is basically used for really weird animations, like really strange facial animations they can do to see how it looks. They basically use it as a complete playground. As such, the stories involving Hildebrand are utterly ridiculous. And on more than one equation, because I love Hildebrand, I can separate myself from the heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, bleeding life story that is the MSQ of Final Fantasy XIV, and then I can play some Hildebrand and have a smile on my face at him being attacked by grenades, or being taken to space, or being attacked by a giant Ultros with his wiggly arms, and his father wearing just underpants and flying from the sky with a powerbomb. I love it. I really, really enjoy it. Some people do not. It's very silly. It's very silly. It's very ridiculous. And if you don't find those characters charming and lovable and interesting, then it's just an awful experience. And a lot of people, I know when I've been doing Hildebrand, come in and go, what the fuck is this? And then they just leave, and they're like, this is not for me. But if you want the new weapons, you're going to need to do Hildebrand. So you can skip, obviously. You can skipper, and get through it very, very quickly. They're not super long storylines, but they do go back a few expansions. But I suspect, though, that these are going to be the contest-winning weapons that were revealed recently, because there are some very, very silly ones, some very ridiculous weapons, skins, and designs that they've done that are going to be brought into the game. So likely that's the direction they're going with. I would suspect that's where they're going, or the choice of one of the two, something along those lines, to fit in with the fact that they're tying it to the very silly ridiculousness of Hildebrand. So that's what I would expect to happen there. We'll have to wait and see, but it feels like that's what they're going to do. Another thing they're doing is, and they're being really confident in bringing in new content and tying it to old content, because those characters that took place in a past storyline really matter, and people like them, and they're very, very like community worshipped characters. And they're doing the same with the Tataru questline by tying it to the Shadow of Macaque, the Sky Pirates, right? So if you've done the Sky Pirates Alliance raid, I loved the Sky Pirates. I thought they were really, really fun. And I was sad that they were like contained to the Alliance raid, and then they just were gone and never to be seen again, pretty much. They're bringing them back and saying, like, okay, if you want to do the next part of Tataru's side quest, and this is a side quest, so you're not tied off from doing the MSQ or anything, but if you want to do Tataru's side quest, you're going to need to go and do this, because these characters are coming back into it. We're not going to be using time to explain them, which is what a lot of other games do. Is like, oh, we want to bring this character from, God, it's like 6 years ago. we need to just, we don't want people to go and do like that concept for 6 years ago. We'll just explain them in 5 minutes. Instead, Square Enix is going, no, you go and do that stuff in the past because then these characters show up. We can be right into the action with them. We don't need to reintroduce them and give you some backstory and context to who these characters are. Again, I've done it, so I'm fine. I enjoyed the shit out of it. I thought that whole stuff was really, really good. So no complaints from me. No complaints from me. Let's talk about the 3 big interesting things then. And I've loved this. Obviously, there's been a huge Western influence coming over to Final Fantasy XIV. Unquestionably. I'm there, other people are there, and we found a little home that we really, really enjoy in terms of our MMO lust for gaming. And it's very different from what we're used to in the West, obviously. And one of the things that people have been really asking for, especially the old World of Warcraft refugees, is like Mythic Plus. Because the dungeons aren't really, complicated too much in Final Fantasy XIV. And they have shown, for anybody who's done a little bit of extra content, how good they can make 4-player content. One of my favorite trials, I would rate it as my number 2 trial, is the 4-man trial from Storeblood. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. With no rolls in it, no healer required, tank kind of, but you can get away with it, where you were just given healing potions to deal with it, and it was all about dodging, ducking, diving, and dealing with the mechanics correctly. I had so much fun doing that as a 4-player team. A little team working together, a really hard challenge. Only took us maybe an hour or something to kill, but once we did, it felt amazing. It felt so good. So they can make really good content. Now, regularly, I have conversations with people either online or offline about could a Mythic Plus system work for Final Fantasy XIV? And the answer I ultimately give is no, not with the way the dungeons and classes are currently designed, if you're talking about directly copy and pasting that system from one to another. So that's consistently ever scaling dungeons with affixes and things like that might disrupt your gameplay in some way. The classes don't really play like that in Final Fantasy XIV. There is CC, there is these options for interrupts, but they're not anything like the rapid response and serious control you can put over enemies in World of Warcraft. And most of the dungeons have some sort of natural barrier to prevent you pulling too much. So wall-to-wall is a thing that I had to learn in Final Fantasy XIV because doesn't exist in WoW. You can pull endlessly in nearly every dungeon because they're designed with Mythic Plus in mind. But in Final Fantasy, you do have these natural barriers that you constantly sort of ram up against, and you can only pull 2 or 3 packs usually before the game stops you progressing. Square Enix agrees. They agree with that entirely. And what they've done is come up with this brand new dungeon, which is going to be implemented in the new patch, which is actually a variable dungeon. And so there's 2 versions to this, which I also loved. Before we get to the hardcore, the Savage version, they're giving a version for the casual players, because this shouldn't be, oh, here's a new system for the hardcore. They're saying, here's a new system for the hardcore who want really challenging content. At the same time, here's a new system entirely in the same vein, but for the casual player base. And they're doing that. They've got solo play 1 to 4 in these variable dungeons, which is going to have optional routes through it, which gives different stories. And you're going to be joined by somebody who's very chatty. So I'm thinking Feo Uhl, I'm thinking Gosetsu, someone along those lines, but you're going to have someone with you and tell a story, and that story is going to change and vary up depending on how you move through this dungeon. Perfect. I want to do that. That's really good. I love hardcore as much as casual content. I like them both. So that was really good. And then they went, okay, for the guys who want something a little harder, all right, we've got 2 versions of a higher difficulty where it's not going to be choose your own pathway. It's going to be a set route, but there are going to be rules to it. So in the first mode, you'll be doing something where if you wipe, you're going to have restricted amounts of resurrections and things like that as you move through the dungeons, but you're going to be pushed through and it's going to be harder to do, and you have to work through it that way. If you really want to go hardcore, we have the Savage version, where if you die, you can't be rezzed. And if the whole party dies, the dungeon completely resets. All the mobs come back to life. You also can't take your time, by the way, because the dungeon's also on a timer. And if you try and take your time, wait for cooldowns and things like that, the dungeon will enrage and kill you. I'm definitely open to the idea of, after our PvP tournament last week, which was just amazing, I'm definitely open for some time trial runs of this dungeon to see. I've got to see how varied it is and how cool it is first, but I really am looking forward to seeing whether we could do something on a fun competitive scale with this dungeon system, because this sounds really fun, and I know a lot of players who are very, very interested in trying this out. So very, very cool. Let's get on to the... Okay. The Island Sanctuary. Now, look, I'm not a big fan of games like Animal Crossing or anything, those kind of games. These fun, casual, relaxing experiences where you kind of take care of your house. Basically a paradise game. So it doesn't appeal to me right now, but the wishes and hopes of everybody who does love those kind of games seems to be coming true. with the Island Sanctuary, where everybody would get their own island. And we just got this sneaky screenshot of how big these islands are. And then they mentioned things like shiny rares, like Pokemon, fields, endless customization. And then they went the extra mile, because I suspected, like, oh god, can people just buy everything? They're like, nope, this is going to have its own player-run separate economy to make sure that everybody's working together and forming their own community. Basically, to me, this looks like they've just made a brand new game and are strapping it onto Final Fantasy XIV. And I genuinely feel like they're just going to lose like half the player base into this void. We're never going to see them again. They exist, and I almost guarantee people will pay their Final Fantasy XIV subscription just to play the Island Sanctuary. When Yoshi P said, oh, this is for casuals, we don't expect you to like eat through this content particularly quickly, I was like, dude. People are going to be here endlessly. The people are going to live here, invite their friends over, see what they can do on the little internal marketplace and get things working, all that. Like, people are going to be wedged into that, especially with the size of the island that they have to mess around in. Everybody gets their own completely for free, and you can just go mad in there. Professions not required. It said not required. Whether that means professions can do some cool stuff, but you don't need it in order to enjoy the Island Sanctuary. I don't know, because I'm a no profession Andy. So that's very, very helpful to me. But they couldn't show us any footage. They said it's a buggy mess right now, but we're getting there. Next live letter, we will be showing some footage of this, and I'm kind of interested in it. I'm going to try it, obviously, but it's not really been my thing in the past. I've tried those games. Never really been for me. I'm all right for a while away, a couple of hours, but then I'm kind of like, I need something more to happen, and moved on to something else. But definitely worth checking out, especially with the competitive nature of the crawlers. That will be interesting to see how that goes. So very excited to see it. Not overly excited to play it. I'm more fearful of it, if I'm being honest. I'm scared to fucking death. It's gonna like eat people alive. Consumed, and they were lost in there forever. I've lived through Warlords of Draenor. I know what happens when people get lost in those garrisons, man. You can't get them out for fucking love nor money. Anyway, getting on to Saturday. Oh, the data center travels is a big deal. I hope it all works out when it's up. But we are running a massive event. We're calling it the Rejoining, which anybody who's played the game will know what it is. And I always encourage people to come to these events because they're huge. We're hoping to have our ward stabled so that we can get everybody in without the server having any issues. We've almost hit we have hit the barrier once on how many people could get into the ward for events, but we're hoping we can manage it this time. So what's going to happen is at 6 p.m. on Saturday, we're going to be heading over to the light servers to team up with Zeppler and her squad, because they are on the light team and we've never been able to coexist until today. So we're going to be moving over to the light server where they're going to have like glam competitions and things like that and be really nice. We're going to go over in the old Ascian robes and say hi for the Rejoining. But then we're going to bring them back to us where we're throwing the first ever Final Fantasy XIV block party. If you're not sure what that term means, in a ward in Final Fantasy, there are up to like 30 houses that are free company houses for the most part right now. We've been reaching out, or I should say Bex, who works with us, has been reaching out to those free companies to say, hey, do you want to form like a community thing here? We all live in the same place and you see each other walking around and doing things all the time. Like, do you want to get involved in this? And many of them like, yeah, absolutely. Any opportunity to that. So we now have 8 or 9 free companies on board with us. And on Saturday, after we visit Light, we're coming back to Chaos. And in our ward, in Ward 5 in Spriggan server, we are going to be having a bunch of live DJs that are literally live. You'll be seeing them playing from their homes via Twitch. They'll have their own streams going where they're DJing for us. And we will have parties at 8 or 9 different places within the same ward where we'll be moving around. And each of them is going to be differently themed. There's going to be casinos. There's going to be all sorts of stuff going on. I don't want to spoil any of it because you should just come down and enjoy it. And even if you haven't got an alt from America or whatever, or Australia, and you haven't made an alt on our server, we'll be streaming it and having fun on Saturday. So I fully encourage you to tune in, especially if you have the mindset that I had. If you didn't see the video the first time I went to an FF14 party, I was 99% sure it was like an ERP sweat fest. It did turn out not to be that way, and it turned out to be really, really super fun. So to the point where our New Year's Eve party that we threw was ridiculously popular. It was so good. We celebrated the New Year coming in across all of Europe. Every hour for like 5 hours, we had a brand new New Year's as countries brought in the New Year, and it was super good. And we're hoping for another experience like that. So that is going to be on Saturday, guys. All right. So that's all my thoughts on the new stuff, and I hope to see you on Saturday as well. All right. Bye, guys.